Hey everyone, welcome back to the show. We usually like to take you deep into the world of earnings calls, but today we're gonna do something a little different. We're gonna take a deep dive into some breaking news out of Canada.
Yeah, this is a big one. It's not every day you see a major world leader step down like this. Especially someone like Justin Trudeau, who just won re-election.
Exactly. I mean, it was a minority government, but still, he's been prime minister for what, like almost a decade?
Yeah.
It's definitely not what I was expecting to be talking about today.
It's certainly a surprise. And the timing is really interesting, too. With an election coming up in just a few months, this throws a whole new wrench into Canadian politics.
So for those who haven't been following every twist and turn, what exactly is going on? Can you give us like the Spark Notes version?
Sure. So basically, Justin Trudeau has announced he's stepping down as Prime Minister and leader of the Liberal Party. We don't have all the details yet, but it sounds like he's planning to make a formal announcement before the upcoming caucus meeting.
Which is on Wednesday, right? So things are moving pretty quickly here.
Yeah, they are. And the caucus meeting is just the start. This is going to set off a whole chain of events, a leadership race within the Liberal Party, and then, of course, the national election in October.
Wow, this is like a political earthquake. So what do you think? What's behind this sudden decision? I mean, was it all those no confidence votes in Parliament? Or is there something more to it?
It's probably a combination of factors. Trudeau's approval ratings have been slipping, and those no confidence votes definitely didn't help. But I think the real turning point was Kristia Freeland's resignation back in December.
Oh yeah, Freeland. That was a pretty dramatic exit. Her resignation letter was pretty scathing, wasn't it?
It was. She basically accused Trudeau of putting politics ahead of the good of the country. And there were some lines in there that really jumped out at me, like when she talked about the government being at odds about the best path forward for Canada.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah.
It definitely made it sound like there were some serious cracks in the Liberal Party's unity.
And she didn't hold back on the economic concerns either. Remember that bit about the potential tariff war? She clearly felt like the government was heading in a dangerous direction.
Right. It wasn't exactly a vote of confidence in Trudeau's leadership. So do you think that's what ultimately pushed him over the edge? Like Freeland's resignation was the final straw?
It's hard to say for sure, but it definitely seems like a plausible scenario. Plus, let's not forget all the other controversies that have been swirling around Trudeau lately.
You mean like that whole thing with the Taylor Swift concert?
Yeah.
That was pretty bad optics, right?
Yeah, I mean, while Montreal was dealing with riots, Trudeau was off at a concert. It didn't exactly project an image of a leader who's in touch with the struggles of everyday Canadians.
And then there was that MP Don Stewart who called him out for dancing while lawless protesters were running rampant.
Ouch. Yeah, that one stung. Look, I get that everyone needs a break sometimes, but as a leader, you have to be mindful of the message you're sending, especially when things are already tense.
So do you think those kinds of personal choices really matter in the grand scheme of things? Or is it all about policy in the end?
It's a tough question. In a perfect world, maybe personal stuff wouldn't matter so much, but we don't live in a perfect world. And these days, every little thing a leader does gets amplified and scrutinized on social media.
It's all about the narrative, right?
Exactly. And unfortunately for Trudeau, the narrative lately hasn't been very positive.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't always like this. When he first came to power back in 2015, it felt like a breath of fresh air.
Yeah.
Remember all that talk about sunny ways?
I do. It was a very optimistic time. He promised a lot of progressive change, and Canadians were really excited about his vision.
And he did win 3 elections, right? So he must have been doing something right.
He did. But those last 2 wins were minority governments, and he actually lost the popular vote both times.
Really? I didn't realize that. So maybe the cracks were starting to show even before all the recent drama.
Maybe. So governing is tough. It takes its toll. And Trudeau had to deal with some major challenges during his time in office.
Like?
Well, there was the COVID-19 pandemic, of course. That threw everything for a loop. Then there's the economy, inflation, housing costs. People are really feeling the pinch. And immigration policy has also been a big issue.
Right. It's a lot to juggle. So do you think maybe those challenges just wore him down? Or maybe he felt like he wasn't the right person to lead Canada through these tough times?
It's possible. We can't know for sure what's going on in his head, but it's clear that the job of Prime Minister has become increasingly difficult in recent years.
Yeah, no kidding. So where do we go from here? What are the next steps in this whole process?
Well, first, Trudeau has to officially resign. Then the Liberal Party will need to choose an interim leader, someone to hold the fort until they can elect a new leader.
And when will that election be?
The national election is scheduled for October, so they've got some time. but they'll need to move quickly to choose a new leader and get their campaign up and running.
This is going to be a wild ride. Buckle up, everyone.
Hold on tight. Canadian politics is about to get very interesting.
Okay, before we go full political pundit here, let's shift gears for a minute and talk markets. Because, we can't resist a good trade idea.
Oh, I knew you couldn't. All right, let's hear it. What kind of market chaos are you thinking about exploiting?
Well, with all this uncertainty swirling around, I'm thinking the Canadian dollar, the CAD, is going to be on a roller coaster ride. Volatility is practically guaranteed.
That's a pretty safe bet. But what's the play? How do we capitalize on this volatility?
I'm feeling a short-term option strategy. Maybe buy some straddles or strangles on the CAD. With all the potential for big swings up or down, there's a good chance we could make a nice profit.
That's an interesting idea. But remember, folks, this is not financial advice. We're just having a bit of fun here, speculating on the potential market impact of this big political news.
Right, of course. This is purely hypothetical.
Yeah.
But it's fun to think about, right? The intersection of politics and markets is always fascinating.
It is. And this is a prime example of how political events can create opportunities for savvy investors.
All right, well, let's step back from the trading desk for a minute and get back to the big picture. What do you think are the most important qualities Canadians should be looking for in their next leader?
That's a great question. Given everything you've talked about, I'd say they need someone who's a strong communicator, someone who can inspire confidence and unite the country.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
They also need to be someone who can handle pressure, because whoever takes over is going to have a lot on their plate.
Absolutely. They'll need to be decisive, resilient, and able to navigate complex challenges. And let's not forget about experience. It would be helpful to have someone who's already familiar with the inner workings of government.
So basically, they need to be like a superhero.
Pretty much, or at least someone who can project that image.
Well, good luck to all the candidates. They're going to need it.
Exactly. This is a tough job, but it's also an incredibly important one. The next Prime Minister of Canada will have a huge impact on the lives of millions of people.
It's a big responsibility. And it'll be fascinating to see who steps up to the challenge.
Stay tuned, folks. This is just the beginning. Canadian politics is about to get very, very interesting.
So we've got strong communication, ability to handle pressure, experience. What else should Canadians be looking for in their next leader?
Well, I think vision is really important. They need to have a clear idea of where they want to take the country and be able to articulate that vision in a way that inspires people.
Right. It can't just be about managing the day-to-day stuff. They
Yeah.
need to have a bigger picture in mind.
Exactly. And they need to be able to rally people around that vision, especially in times like these when there's so much division and uncertainty.
And speaking of uncertainty, what about the economic challenges facing Canada? How much of a factor do you think that will be in the leadership race?
Oh, it's going to be huge. The economy is always a top issue for voters. And right now, Canadians are struggling with inflation, rising interest rates, a housing crisis. It's a lot to deal with.
So whoever takes over is going to have to hit the ground running. No time for a honeymoon period.
Nope. They'll need to have a solid plan for tackling those economic issues, and they'll need to be able to communicate that plan effectively to Canadians.
And convince them that they're the right person to lead the country through these tough times.
Exactly. It's a tall order, but that's the nature of leadership, especially in a democracy.
So beyond the economy, what other issues do you think will be front and center in this leadership race?
Well, climate change is obviously a big one. Canada has made some progress on that front, but there's still a lot of work to be done.
Right. And it's an issue that divides people. So it'll be interesting to see how the candidates approach it.
Yeah, some will probably try to appeal to the more progressive wing of the party, while others might take a more moderate stance. It'll all depend on who they're trying to win over.
It's all about strategy, isn't it? Trying to figure out how to appeal to the broadest base of voters.
Exactly. And in a country as diverse as Canada, that's no easy feat.
So we've got the economy, climate change. What else?
Healthcare is always a hot button issue in Canada. And with an aging population, it's only going to become more important in the years to come.
So the next leader will need to have a strong healthcare plan. And probably a thick skin, too, because healthcare debates can get pretty heated.
Oh, absolutely. It's one of those issues where everyone has an opinion and they're not afraid to share it.
Well, that's democracy for you, messy, complicated. But ultimately, it's the best system we've got.
I agree. And I think this leadership race is going to be a great example of democracy in action. We're going to see a lot of debate, a lot of different perspectives, and hopefully in the end, Canadians will choose a leader who can represent their interests and move the country forward.
It's going to be fascinating to watch. And who knows, maybe we'll even learn a thing or two about Canadian politics along the way.
Always a good opportunity to expand our horizons.
Okay, so before we wrap up this deep dive, let's have some fun and revisit our "This is not financial advice" segment. Are you ready for round 2?
Bring it on. I'm always up for a little market speculation, as long as we're clear that we are not financial advisors.
Of course, of course.
Mm.
Always good to have that disclaimer. So building on our earlier prediction about volatility in the Canadian dollar, I'm thinking we take it a step further. Let's look at specific sectors that could be impacted by this leadership change.
Interesting. Which sectors are on your radar?
Well, given the uncertainty surrounding energy policy, I think the energy sector is ripe for some speculative plays. Depending on who takes the helm, we could see a shift towards renewables or a doubling down on traditional energy sources.
That makes sense. And with Freeland potentially back in the picture, fiscal policy could also be in play. That could have implications for the financial sector, particularly banks and insurance companies.
Exactly. And don't forget about healthcare. Healthcare is always a hot-button issue in Canada, and a new leader could bring about significant changes to the system.
So many possibilities, so much potential for market movement. This is why we love to analyze the intersection of politics and finance, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's all connected. But remember, folks, this is just us speculating. Don't go making any rash investment decisions based on our wild theories.
This is not financial advice. We're just having some fun exploring the potential ripple effects of this major political event.
Well said. On that note, we'll leave you to ponder the possibilities. Stay informed, stay engaged, and keep an eye on the Canadian political landscape. Things are about to get very interesting.
Until next time, keep exploring and keep learning. There's always something new to discover, especially in the ever-changing world of politics and finance. It is. And this is a prime example of how political events can create opportunities for savvy investors. But let's shift gears for a sec and talk about the aftermath of this whole Trudeau thing. What happens now? Like, does he just clear out his desk and peace out?
That's a good question. I mean, I doubt he's going to be sticking around for too long, but there's a whole process that has to play out. It's not like he can just walk away and someone else steps right in.
Yeah, right. It's not like a normal job where you give your 2 weeks notice and that's it. There's a whole constitutional framework for this kind of thing.
Okay, so walk us through it. What are the next steps?
So the first thing that needs to happen is Trudeau has to officially submit his resignation to the Governor General. That's like the Queen's representative in Canada.
Right, I remember learning about that in like 6th grade social studies. But it's been a while. So what does the Governor General do?
Well, the Governor General has a few options. They could ask Trudeau to stay on as a caretaker prime minister until a new leader is chosen, or they could appoint someone else to be the interim prime minister.
So like a temporary prime minister.
Exactly. Someone to hold the reins while the Liberal Party sorts out their leadership situation.
Makes sense. So who would that be? Like, is there a clear front runner for interim prime minister?
It's too early to say for sure, but there are a few names being thrown around. Dominic LeBlanc is a possibility. He's a close ally of Trudeau, and he's held a few different cabinet positions.
Oh, right. I've heard of him.
Yeah.
He's like a seasoned politician, right?
Yeah, he's been around for a while, so he's got the experience. Another name that's come up is Kristia Freeland.
Wait, really? But she's the one who just resigned.
I know. It seems a little crazy. But there's been some talk that maybe she could step in as interim leader to help stabilize things, and then she wouldn't run for the permanent leadership.
That would be a twist. So
Yeah.
basically, we've got a whole lot of uncertainty right now. No one knows for sure who's going to be the interim prime minister, let alone the next permanent leader.
Exactly. It's going to be a very interesting few months in Canadian politics.
Well, I, for one, am excited to see how it all plays out. It's
Yeah.
like a real-life political thriller.
I know, right? And the stakes are pretty high. Whoever becomes the next prime minister of Canada is going to have a lot on their shoulders.
No kidding. So what do you think are the biggest challenges facing Canada right now? The things that the next prime minister is going to have to deal with?
Well, the economy is definitely a top concern. Inflation is still high, interest rates are rising, and people are worried about a potential recession.
Yeah, those are all big issues.
Yeah.
And they're not unique to Canada. The whole world is dealing with economic uncertainty right now.
Exactly. But that doesn't make it any easier for Canadians who are struggling to make ends meet. The next prime minister is going to have to find a way to get inflation under control and stimulate economic growth.
Okay, so the economy's a big one. What else?
Climate change is another major challenge. Canada has set some ambitious goals for reducing greenhouse gas emissions, but there's still a lot of work to be done.
Right, and it's a global problem. So even if Canada does everything right, it won't make much of a difference if other countries don't do their part.
True, but that doesn't mean Canada shouldn't try to be a leader on this issue. The next Prime Minister needs to be someone who's committed to tackling climate change and who can work with other world leaders to find solutions.
All right, so economy, climate change, anything else?
Well, healthcare is always a big issue in Canada. There's a lot of debate about how to improve the system and make it more affordable and accessible for everyone.
Yeah, that's a tough one. Healthcare is so complex, and there are a lot of different opinions on how to fix it.
Exactly. But the next Prime Minister is going to have to find a way to navigate those complexities and come up with a healthcare plan that works for all Canadians.
Okay, so those are some of the big challenges facing Canada right now. But there are also a lot of opportunities.
Yeah.
What do you think are some of the things that the next Prime Minister could focus on to make Canada even better?
Well, Canada has a lot of strengths. It's a diverse and inclusive country with a strong economy and a beautiful natural environment.
Yeah, we've got a lot going for us. So how do we build on those strengths?
I think the next Prime Minister could focus on investing in education and innovation. That would help to create a more competitive workforce and attract businesses to Canada.
Right. Then it would also help to prepare Canadians for the jobs of the future.
Exactly. Another area where Canada could really excel is in clean energy. We have a lot of potential for renewable energy sources like solar, wind, and hydro.
So we could become a global leader in clean energy.
Absolutely. And that would not only be good for the environment, but it would also create jobs and boost the economy.
Sounds like a win-win.
Yeah.
So basically, the next Prime Minister has a lot of work to do, but they also have a lot of opportunities to make a real difference.
Yeah, it's a tough job, but it's also an incredibly rewarding one. And I'm sure whoever takes on the challenge will do their best to serve the people of Canada.
Well said. Well, that's about all the time we have for today. We've covered a lot of ground, from Trudeau's resignation to the challenges and opportunities facing Canada.
It's been a fascinating discussion, and I'm sure we'll be revisiting this topic in the weeks and months to come.
Definitely, Canadian politics is never boring. So thanks for joining us for this deep dive. And as always, stay curious, stay informed, and stay engaged.